Martin Scorsese's next movie, after his gangster epic The Irishman, the Netflix picture nominated for 10 Oscars and starring Robert De Niro, Al Pacino and Joe Pesci, will be a movie called Killers of the Flower Moon, based on the book by David Grannn of the same name, published in 2017. The movie is described as a western by Scorsese and will star Robert De Niro and Leonardo DiCaprio in their first ever feature-length movie with the filmmaker. This will be De Niro's 10th Scorsese film and DiCaprio's 6th, but incredibly, the first the three have ever made together. The movie reportedly has a budget of $200 million, the highest of Scorsese's career, and an extraordinary amount that apparently gave Paramount Pictures, the studio that was supposed to finance the project, cold feet, and instead they made a deal with Apple, which will see the movie, as it currently stands, financed either completely or significantly by Apple, and then released in cinemas by Paramount Pictures. Once the movie has done its run in theatres, it will head over to Apple TV Plus for streaming, much like how Scorsese's The Irishman had a brief theatrical release and then came out on Netflix shortly after. But what is this film, with its brilliant cast and jaw-dropping budget, even about? Well, the movie will cover one of the most unsettling and darkest periods of modern American history, something which was dubbed the Reign of Terror, and which concerns a series of murders involving the Osage Native American nation of Oklahoma in the 1920s. The film will explore greed, racial prejudice, and the mindset of people willing to carry out genocide. Even today, most of the murder cases remain unsolved. The title is a reference to an Osage saying which describes tall plants overgrowing and cutting off sunlight and water of smaller spring flowers, which causes them to die. During the period in which the film is set, America was moving away from the frontier culture and into the modern industrial world. The Osage Nation, a Native American people, were forced off their land by white settlers and onto an area which was deemed as unfruitful by the settlers, hence why they allowed the Osages to emigrate there. Ironically, an oil discovery was discovered buried beneath the Osages' new land, resulting in the poor Osages becoming incredibly rich overnight. Reportedly, they became the richest people in the world per capita. However, the US government deemed the Osages incompetent to handle their newfound wealth. Since the government could not legally outright take the oil from the Osages, they devised a system where the Osage Nation individuals who owned oil rights were given guardianships, where control over their wealth was given to these white guardians, and the more of an Osage you were, in terms of ancestry, the less control you had over your own money. Of course, this system was abused by many of the guardians, who essentially now had access to an almost unlimited amount of money. Many of the guardians would funnel money into businesses they themselves owned, for example, and David Grann's book reports on numerous cases of abuse and misuse of the Osage's wealth, including one Osage woman who begged her guardian for money so that she could get medical aid for her sick baby, to no avail, and the baby died. As if this wasn't bad enough, the newfound wealth that the Osages gained attracted some unsavory characters, and one after the other, numerous Osage natives began being murdered one by one at an alarming rate. And it wasn't just the natives, but even white people who may have stumbled upon evidence of the identity of the murderers also began being killed as well, including one man thrown off a moving train who quite possibly was on his way to contact the authorities. The local law, fueled by racial prejudice, turned a blind eye to the killings, and those that made a genuine attempt to help were unable to, and the desperate Osages turned to the federal government. Under the leadership of a young J. Edgar Hoover, the new law enforcement agency, which would go on to be named the Federal Bureau of Investigations, the FBI, was sent to solve the case of the killings, and the undercover operation was led by Tom White, a former Texas Ranger. Many horrific murders are documented in the book, many concerning the Brown family. The first of these was a woman called Anne Brown, discovered in a ravine with a bullet in the back of her head, and shortly after, the likes of her mother and another sister followed. Many people were poisoned, and one couple were blown up in their home. After a lengthy operation, which included recruiting local criminals like bootleggers and cattle raiders, White locked in on his prime suspect, a man named William Hale. I have another video on Hale called Who Was William Hale, which you can check out for more information on the man, but in short, he was the last person you'd expect to be involved with the Osage murders. Known as the King of the Osage Hills, Hale was the self-declared friend of the Osage people. He was loved amongst the nation, and would regularly donate to charity causes for them. And when the killings took place, he swore to do anything within his power to find the perpetrators, which meant a lot since he was a very influential figure. Many of the Osage deaths occurred in the family of his nephew, Ernest Burkhart, who was married to Molly Brown, who was a sister of the murdered Anne Brown. Behind the former cattleman's public persona, which included becoming a deputy sheriff, Hale was a man who intimidated, lied and bullied his way to the top of the food chain within the community, and he held significant control over the area. The murders in the Brown family were carried out in a very specific order, an order which would conclude with the family's oil head rights being inherited by Ernest Burkhart, the white nephew of Hale who was married to the Osage Molly Brown. When Hale was arrested, he decided to fight his case in court, and due to his vast influence, he probably would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for Ernest, who was also arrested, cracking under pressure and admitting to his part in the murder scheme. It turned out that Hale had masterminded a plot with the likes of Ernest to kill members of the Brown family until the inheritance of their oil head rights would pass to him. Hale was so powerful that even the medical professionals who investigated the murders were in on it, covering up poisonings by passing them off as illnesses. Locals were either bought off by Hale or too terrified to speak out against him to the investigators, which made their case even harder, ultimately saved by Ernest's confession. Molly Brown, the last surviving member of her family, excluding her children, also fell to sickness during the Reign of Terror, and suspiciously recovered after moving away, suggesting that Ernest Burkhart was in on a plot to murder his own wife, the mother of his children. William Hale was only ever convicted of one murder and sentenced to prison, but would later be released around 15 years later on parole. Ernest was also sent to prison and was released 12 years after Hale. The FBI's findings reveal that at least 24 murders occurred between 1921 and 1926, though David Grann's research suggests that the Reign of Terror lasted decades and hundreds of murders have gone unsolved, and we'll never know really the true extent of the killer's cruelty. Killers of the Flower Moon offers a chance for the victims to have some voice in a period of American history that has been brushed under the carpet. Martin Scorsese has sought advice and counsel from the Osage tribes, and the film will feature real-life authentic Native Americans. Originally, it was thought that Leonardo DiCaprio, who interestingly has already played J. Edgar Hoover in a Clint Eastwood movie, a character who might be in the film, would be playing the lead investigator Tom White. However, Scorsese and DiCaprio made a change, and DiCaprio will instead be playing the conspirator Ernest Burkhart, who folded under questioning. It is thought that this is one of the primary reasons why Paramount backed out of financing the film, as DiCaprio, often the pretty boy hero, would not be playing the straight arrow and would instead be playing a murderous character. This casting also suggests, along with certain comments Scorsese has made in interviews, that unlike the book the film is based on, the movie won't be so much a murder mystery as it will be a character study of the murderers, perhaps telling the tale from the bad guy's point of view in classic Scorsese style. The role of William Hale will be played by Robert De Niro. For updates on the film and related content, consider subscribing to the channel, and thanks for watching.